just have out what you're actually going to be using. All right. First step on this is to find the center of your Bristol. The center of any rectangle can be found by drawing an X from corner to corner. And you don't need to draw all the way across, just the middle is what we're looking for. So I can find this spot right here, draw my X, and I found the middle. That's my middle point, and it allows me to draw my room. We could turn this into a comedy act if you want. I start here, set this on 4 inches in the middle, make a mark out here. I'm going to draw this a little darker than you should because I want you to be able to see, and I want it to be visible in the video here. Be as accurate as you can, because any inaccuracy here becomes a great big inaccuracy later on, because the lines themselves are based on other lines. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing here. Measure up 4 inches, make a mark, down 4, make a mark. Now, again, I want to emphasize, I'm drawing this darker than you should, because a light line is sharp and accurate, and it's easy to erase. And if you draw it heavy, then you have to decide left or right side of that line. All right, the next step, and this is the tedious part, we're going to measure 1-inch increments all the way around the square, but be as accurate as possible with this step, because this is where a lot of people go off. I had someone just last week doing the same project in the other section, and they said it's just not matching up. The lines, as they drew the rest of the illustration, the lines didn't match up, and so I started checking, and it's always one of two things. In this case, it was they had not measured these correctly. Some of them were sort of close to the spot. Another person had the same problem or similar problem, but what they did was they didn't keep their T-square nice and square against the edge here, and they got that square, and then they started to draw. When they started to draw, it moved just a little bit, and they didn't notice it. So be as accurate as you can, and this thing will work out just perfectly. Don't be discouraged if you don't get this right away. I didn't understand how to ride a bicycle the first time. I fell down 6 or 8 times, but you can learn it. Sometimes you have to understand things after you do them. So trust me on this. Just do what I'm telling you. And if you look at this very long, it will just make perfect sense to you. All right. Notice that my center point does not need to be kept, so I'm going to erase this center point. This confuses a lot of people, because I've had a lot of people come back and instead of choosing a vanishing point on their horizon, they chose that point and just drew everything to the middle and then tried to make it work, and it didn't. All right. So now again, I am 6 feet tall. That would be the 6-foot mark. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. My eyes are not on the top of my head, so I'm going to put my eye level just a little bit below that, and I'm going to, again, lightly. Now in this case, I'm going to draw it heavy so you can see, but lightly draw my horizon line, my eye level. I'm going to now choose a vanishing point. Don't put it dead center. Move it a little bit off, maybe a ½ inch off the middle. I made it a little bigger than you should, but just so you can see it. And I'm going to draw from that point to each of my corners.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Next time we do this, can we do it together as a class, all at once?
No.
No?
No, it would take us 3 weeks to do this project, and you won't get it anymore, because I want you to understand how to do it. I don't want you to just do it. If I just wanted it done, I'd do it myself. But I want you to understand, and to understand, you really kind of have to slug through this yourself. All right? But that's the short answer to it. A good question, but I wouldn't, no. All right, now, the distance from here to my station point, this is my VP, or vanishing point, lightly VP. My station point is where I'm standing. We might call this standing point, but a station point is where my feet, I can put my feet out here. I cannot be drawing a room from outside and my feet be in the room. So my station point has to be down here somewhere, right? There's a way to find that, but I'm not going to talk about that right now. Just trust me, all right? So I gave you 10 inches as the distance from my VP to my SP. From the vanishing point over is 10 inches. So again, I measure this distance. Yes, you can draw on the tabletop as long as you clean up your mess and erase it when you're through at the end of the day. Make a little dot right there, and I'm going to connect that dot, and I only need to use this line once. Or at least I only need to draw it once. All right? That line right there tells me where the back wall is. So I move my T-square up, keep my T-square nice and snug over here so it stays accurate. And I'm going to draw from that point over until it hits the other line coming up from the corner. Now I've got my floor drawn. Now all I need to do is draw the back wall. And again, I do that with my T-square and my triangle. Where it hit that one, I draw vertical until it hits the line coming from this corner. I do the same thing on this side. Again, careful to keep my T-square head snug against the edge. And I draw vertical. And if I've done this correctly, then these two will line up, and they do pretty close. Right. There I have my floor, my two walls, my ceiling, and my back wall. The next step is I'm going to draw from each of these lines 1-inch marks in the front back to that vanishing point, but I'll stop at the back wall. Again, be as accurate as you can with this. Your life depends on it. When you watch me do this, it will either seem like, well, that's real simple, or that's just impossibly complex. Neither is true. It's just something that you have to follow. Essentially, we're doing applied geometry. No numbers, really, other than just measuring the inch marks. But every place this line right here crosses one of these I just drew, that's where I'm going to draw my horizontals with my T-square at each of those points. Okay? So I just line that up with that little intersection. And I draw through it from wall to wall.
Wait, why are you doing that? What is that?
Well, the reason I chose them at that, well, the reason I do is because I want to have this floor gridded off in 1-inch squares that could progressively get smaller as they go further away from it. There's a gradient, right? A gradient of size. Each of those little squares gets smaller. That's why I'm doing it. How I'm doing it is I'm using this line right here as it crosses each of these lines I drew here. That's where I put my T-square to create those lines. Now you notice I keep my pen pretty well vertical. I lean just a little bit in the direction I'm drawing. If you lean it out this way, it'll be inaccurate. Or if you lean it in so it's up under the edge of the T-square or triangle, it'll be inaccurate. But just keep it pretty vertical. And that's especially true with your ink pens, because if you take that ink pen and you lean it in the direction you're going, it'll scoop up fibers into the tip, and it'll clog it and make it where it won't work anymore. So the next step now, obviously, I think, is that where these hit the wall, we draw vertical. And again, we do these with our T-square. And the key thing here is matching these points where it hits the wall very accurately. So be very careful. You can't do this sitting down. I'll just warn you, if you try to do this sitting down, you're really spitting into the wind. Because I need to be able to put enough pressure on my T-square and triangle to keep them steady. If I'm sitting down, they want to slide around on me, and I'm looking at things from a low angle, and I'll mismeasure things almost every time if I do that. So stand up where I'm looking straight down on it, where I can put some weight on both the T-square and the triangle to keep it steady and straight. And needless to say, if your kid brother is in the room, and you happen to be doing this at home, tell him in no uncertain terms, leave you alone, right? Or if Matthew Bowman is bugging you while you're drawing, tell him, Matthew, I'm trying to work. Leave me alone. Or anybody else for that matter, right? And you notice these are progressively getting closer and closer as they go back. But I've got to be careful then and make sure they do that. You don't want them to get smaller, 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 and then larger, smaller, right? They need to keep progressively getting smaller. So just check yourself as you go. Okay? Worked out pretty well, right? Now the next step, and I won't do this on all 3 walls myself, but you can see the method that you go through. And to do the rest of the wall, you draw back to that vanishing point from each of these and stop at the back wall. See how fast this goes? It really is not that difficult. Now I usually will take my pinpoint and put it either on the vanishing point or the beginning point out here on the outside edge first, and then line my T-square and triangle up with that. It's just a little bit easier to do that, because you only have to line up one end of it, because the pinpoint holds it in place for the other end. All right. Does that make sense to you? Now, when you finished the ceiling and the other wall, then we come back and use our T-square to draw these across the back wall. And they would go from this line across, and hopefully they would meet up with the lines on the other side of the room.
Are you going to put the video on YouTube?
Yeah. Do I have any questions on this part so far? Now I'm going kind of quick because I don't want this to be a hour-long video on this, but if you do have questions, certainly someone else would have the same question. I'd be too timid to ask. Now, again, the reason I would tell you do this lightly in pencil is we're going to come back and we're going to ink this when we're finished with our technical pen. And we'll erase the pencil guidelines.
So
and
the
we'll
back
have
wall, so the back wall is just going to be 1/8 squares?
Right. Now, let me re-emphasize, I'm doing this a lot heavier than you should because I want you to be able to see it while I'm doing this, but draw them very lightly because they'll make them nice and sharp and easy to erase after you've inked it. All right, now the next step is going to be to put the figures on here. I think I left this on here. Start off with a figure. Now, obviously, this girl, if we put her on here, if she's in the front row, she's about 7 feet tall. And I haven't run into any 7-foot tall women, though probably there are some. But we're going to have to size her down. What we would do is with tracing paper, lay it over the top, tape it so it's in position, and then trace the outline of that figure. Spray a little bit of glue on the back. And we'll glue this down temporarily to the black construction paper. Now, before we do that, we take it down to the